We've all been there when you make just one poor decision and instead of it being over, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse again. Well, hello, and welcome back to the Coachman, where we take old stories and we pull the real truth out of them. So, for today's reading, we're going to be heading back to one of my favorite countries, which is Holland. And we're going to be going back to the 18th and 19th century, back to a story called The Woman with the 366 Children. Now, it sounds exaggerated, but it's not really about the numbers, but it's about how fast things can go haywire. So let's get into the story. Long, long ago, before the oldest stork was young, and big deer and little fawns were very many in the Dutch forest, there was a pond famous for its fish, which lay in the heart of Holland, with woods nearby. Hunters came in their bows and arrows to hunt the stags, or, out of the bright waters, boys and men in the sunshine drew out the fish with shining scales, or lured the trout with fly bait from their hiding places. In those days, the fish pond was called the Viver, and the woods where the deer ran Rensselaer, or the deer's lair. So, because the forest of oak and beech and all the trees were so fine, and game on land and water were plentiful, the lord of the country came here and built his castle. He made a hedge around his estate so that the people called the place of Count's Hedge, called it the Count's Hedge, or as we say, the Hague. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. The Hague, everybody knows. I mean, if you don't know what it is, it's like it's from what I remember of the Hague, it's kind of like the center of like international courts, where if you end up at the Hague, I gotta be honest, you really fucked up, like for real. But honestly, Holland as a country, if you've never been there, I highly recommend it. Honestly, it's the first country I went to, and it is still to this day, I would say top three, hands down, most beautiful. So yeah, you got to go check it out. Even today, within the beautiful city, the forests with their grand old trees still remain, and the fish pond called the Viver is there yet with its swans. On the little island, the fluffy, dawny cygnets are born and grow to be big birds with long necks bent like an arch. In another part of the town, also, with their trees for nesting and their pond for wading, are children of the same storks. Those fathers and mothers lived there before America was discovered. By and by, many people of rank and fortune came to The Hague for its society. They built their grand houses at the slope of the hill, not far away from the Viver, and, in time, a city grew up. It was a fine sight to see the lords and ladies riding out of the castle into our country. The cavalcade was very splendid when they went hawking. There were pretty women on horseback, and gentlemen in velvet clothes with feathers in their hats, and the horses seemed proud to bear them. The falconers followed on foot, with the hunting birds perched on a hoop, which the man inside the circle carried around him. Now, if you remember, we did read a story about a falconer. I won't tell you what it is, but if you just think about it a little bit. Each falcon had on a little cap or hood, which was fastened over its head. When this was taken off, it flew high up into the air on its hunt for the big and little birds, which it brought down for its masters. There were also men with dogs to beat the reeds and bushes and drive the smaller birds from shelter. The huntsmen were armed with spears, lest the wild boar or bear should rush out and attack them. It was always a merry day when a hawking party, in their fine clothes and gay trappings, started out. There were huts as well as palaces, and poor people also, at The Hague. Among these was a widow whose twin babies were left without anything to eat, for her husband and their father had been killed in war. Having no money to buy a cradle and her babies being too young to be left alone, she put the pair of little folks on her back and went out to beg. Sad, but true story for many. Now, there was a fine lady, a countess, who lived with her husband, the count, near the Biber. She was childless and very jealous of other women who were mothers and had children playing around them. On this day, when the beggar woman with her two babies on her back came along, the grand lady was in a unusually bad temper. For all her pretty clothes, she was not a person of fine manners. Indeed, she often acted more like a snarling dog, ready to snap at anyone who should speak to her. Although she had cradles and nurses and lovely baby clothes all ready, there was no baby. This spoiled her disposition, so that her husband and the servants could hardly live with her. AKA, this is one crabby old bitch. Period. And I'm not gonna lie, man. I'll tell you this for free. Happy house? Happy life? Happy wife? Fuck that. I got this woman in my house and she's going off on me and snapping at me. I will throw her out the fucking window into the moat. Period. I'm not saying I'm going to punch her, beat her, or anything, but I'm saying she's going out the window into the moat. And she's going to be wearing the prettiest dress that I bought her. One day, after dinner, when there had been everything good to eat and drink on her table, and plenty of it, the Countess went out to walk in front of her house. It was the 3rd day of January, but the weather was mild. The beggar woman, with her two babies on her back and their arms around her neck, crying with hunger, came trudging along. She went into the garden and asked the Countess for food or an alms. She expected surely at least a slice of bread, a cup of milk, or a small coin. Nothing big. But the Countess was rude to her and denied her both food and money. She even burst into a bad temper and reviled the woman for having 2 children instead of 1. Where did you get those brats? They are not yours. You just brought them here to play on my feelings and excite my jealousy. Be gone. But the poor woman kept her temper. She begged piteously, and said, "For the love of heaven, feed my babies, even if you will not feed me." Good woman, putting her kids before herself. Guarantee you ain't seeing that shit today. No, they are not yours. You are a cheat, said the fine lady, nursing her rage. Indeed, madam, they are both my children, and born on one day. They have one father, but he is dead. He was killed in the war while serving his grace, your husband. Don't tell me such a story, snapped back at the Countess, and now in fury. I don't believe that anyone, man or woman, could have 2 children at once. Away with you. And she seized a stick to drive off the poor woman. I'm telling you, Holmes, this beggar woman ain't got nothing to lose. I'm telling you, put paws on her. Now, it was the turn of the beggar's woman to answer back. Both had lost their temper, and the 2 angry women seemed more like she-bears robbed of their wits. Sounds like a modern woman wants to be with the bear. Heaven punish you, you wicked, cruel, cold-hearted woman. cried the mother. Speak the truth, lady. Her two babies were almost choking her in their eagerness for food, yet their cries never moved the rich lady, who had bread and good things to spare, while their poor parent had not a drop of milk to give them. The countess now called her men servants to drive the beggar away. This they did most brutally. They pushed the poor woman outside the garden gate and closed it behind her as she turned away. The poor mother, taking up each of her children by its back, one in each hand, held them up before the grand lady and cried out loudly so that all could hear her. May you have as many children as there are days in the year. Now, with all her wrath burning in her breast, what the beggar woman really meant was this. It was the 3rd of January, and so there were but 3 days in the year so far. She intended to say that instead of having to care for 2 children, the countess might have the trouble of rearing 3, and all born on the same day. AKA, the old beggar was like, bitch, I don't hope you have twins. I hope you get triplets. But, But the lady in her mansion cared nothing for the beggar woman's words. Why should she? She had her lordly husband, who was a count, and he owned thousands of acres. Besides, she possessed vast riches. In her great house were 10 men servants and 31 maid servants, together with her rich furniture and fine clothes and jewels. The lofty brick church, to which she went on Sundays, was hung with the coat of arms of her famous ancestors. The stone floor with its great slabs was so grandly carved with the crest and heraldry of her family that to walk over these was like climbing a mountain or tramping across a plowed field. Common folks had to be careful lest they should stumble over the bosses and knobs of the carved tombs. A long train of her servants and tenants on the farms followed her when she went to worship. Inside the church, the Lord and the lady sat in high seats on velvet cushions and under a canopy. Sounds like they got too much money problems. But you know what they say about too much money? When is enough? By the time summer had come, according to the fashion in all good Dutch families, all sorts of pretty baby clothes were made ready. There were soft, warm, swaddling bands, tiny socks, and long white linen dresses. A baptismal blanket, covered with silk, was made for the christening and daintily embroidered. Plenty of lace and pink and blue ribbons, pink for a girl and blue for a boy, were kept at hand. And because there might be twins, a double set of garments was provided. Besides, baby bathtubs and all sorts of nice things for the little stranger or strangers, whether one or two, to come. Even the names were chosen, one for a boy and the other for a girl. Would it be Wilhelm or Wilhelmina? It was real fun to think over the names, but it was hard to choose out of so many. At last, the Countess crossed off all but 46, or the following, nearly every girl's name ending in E, as in our Polly, Sally. Girls, boys, Magtel, Katerina, Gerrit, Hisbet, Naleti, Alida, Cornelis, Jauza, Zelia, Anati, Volkert, Mindert, Janetti, Christina, Killian, Adrian, Zora, Zartrina, Johannes, Joaquin, Marty, Betty, Petrus, Arendt, Wilhelmit, Eva, Barent, Derek, Gertruja, Turka, Velso, Niklas, Petronella, Maiken, Hendrik, Stotz, Margreta, Hiliaka, Tunis, Gozen, Josina, Betty, Walter, Wilhelmite, Japik, Evert. A lot of girls and boys' names. But before the sun set on the expected day, it was neither one boy nor one girl, nor were all the 46 names chosen sufficient. For the beggar woman's wish had come true, in a way not expected. There were as many as, and no fewer, children than there were days in the year. And since this was a leap year, there were 366 little folks in the house, so that other names, besides the 46, had to be used. Now, most people might think that this is about punishment, meaning this moral story is about punishment, but it's not. It's something a little bit else. So let's proceed. Yet none of these wee creatures was bigger than a mouse. Beginning at daylight, one after another appeared, first a girl and then a boy, so that after the 48th, the nurse was at her wit's end to give them names. It was not possible to keep the little babies apart. The 31 servant maids of the mansion were all called in to help in sorting out the girls from the boys, but soon it seemed hopeless to try to pick out Peter from Henry or Catalina from Annette. After an hour or two spent at the task and others coming along, the women found that it was useless to try any longer. It was found that either Piet, Jan, and Klaus, Hank, Dove, and Jopik among the boys, and Molly, Micah, Lena, Elsie, Annette, and Marie were getting all mixed up. So they gave up the attempt in despair. Besides, the supply of pink and blue ribbons had given out long before, after the first dozen or so were born. As for the baby clothes, made ready, they were of no use, for all the garments were too big, and one of the long dresses, tied up like a bag, one might possibly, with stuffing, have put the whole family of 366 brothers and sisters. Now, I'm not going to lie. This is a lot of kids, boy. I'm telling you, this is a lot of kids. You know what I'm saying? What's even more nuts is that this woman got this many kids, yeah? And she only got one baby daddy. So how comes all these women today, bro, got like 4 kids, 5, whatever it is, and still every kid got a new baby daddy? What's going on? I'm just saying. I'm not judgment, no judgment. I'm just asking a question. That's all. What happened? It was not likely such small fry of human beings could live long. So, the good Bishop of Guy of Utrecht, when he heard that the beggar woman's curse had come true in so unexpected a manner, ordered that the baby should be all baptized at once. The Count, who was strict in his ideas of both custom and church law, insisted on it too. So, nothing would do but to carry the tiny infants to church. How to get them there was a question. The whole house had been rummaged to provide things to carry the little folks in, but the supply of trays and mince pie dishes and crocks was exhausted at the 360th baby. So there was left only a Turk's head, or rounded glazed earthen dish, fluted and curved, would look like the turban of a Turk, hence its name. Into this last batch of babies, or extra 6 girls, were stowed Curiously enough, number 366 was an inch taller than the others. The 30 housemaids was given a tray, for each was to carry 12 mannequins, and one, the last six, in the Turk's head. Instead of rich silk blankets, a wooden tray, and no clothes on, must suffice. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds like they went from straight rags to riches. You know what I mean? Because you got all these kids on these like trays and in a Turk's head. You know what I mean? But straight butt ass. But okay, we'll let it be what it is. You know what I mean? You got to do what you got to do when you got that many kids. In the Grootkirk, or Great Church, the bishop was waiting with his assistants holding brass basins full of holy water for the christening. All the town, including the dogs, were out to see what was going on. Many boys and girls climbed up on the roofs of the one-story houses, or in the trees to get a better view of the curious procession, the like of which had never seen in The Hague before. Neither has anything like it ever been ever since. So the parade began. First went the Count with his captains, the trumpeters blowing their trumpets. These were followed by the men servants, all dressed in their best Sunday clothes, who had the crest and arms of their master, the Count, on their backs and breast. Then came on the company of 31 maids, each one carrying a tray, on which were 12 mannequins, or minikins. 20 of these trays were round and made of wood, lined with velvet, smooth and soft, but 10 were earthenware, oblong in shape like a manger. In these, every year, were baked the Christmas pies. At first, all went on finely, for the outdoor air seemed to put the babies asleep, and there was no crying. But no sooner were they inside the church than about 200 of the brats began wailing and whimpering. Pretty soon, they set up such a squall that the Count felt ashamed of his progeny, and the bishop looked very unhappy. To make matters worse, one of the maids, although warned of the danger, stumbled over the helmet of an old crusader carved in stone, and that rose some 6 inches or so above the floor. In a moment she fell and lay sprawling, spilling out at least a dozen babies. "Helia Micah, Holy Mary," she cried, as she rolled over. "Have I killed them?" Sounds like... All right. Happily, the wee ones were thrown against the long train gown of an old lady walking directly in front of her, so that they were unhurt. They were easily picked up and laid on the tray again, and once more the line started. Happily, the bishop had been notified that he would not have to call out the names of all the infants, that is, 366, for this would have kept him at the solemn business all day long. It had been arranged that instead of any on the list of the chosen 46 to be so named, all the boys should be called John, and all the girls Elizabeth, or in Dutch, Jan and Lisbeth, or Lisbethja. Yet even to say John 180 times and Lisbeth 186 times nearly tired the old gentleman to death, for he was fat and slow, like most clergymen in that day, because they had all kinds of power under the sun. Yeah, I'm telling you, clergymen had it made in this century. No joke. They were like, no joke, they were gods, pretty much. You were in, like, if you were a holy man, you ate well. So, after the first 6 trays full of wee folks had been sprinkled one at a time, the bishop decided to asperse them, that is, shake from a mop or brush the holy water on a full tray of babies at one time. So he called for the aspersium. Then, clipping this in the basin of holy water, he scattered the drops over the wee folk until all, even the six extra girl babies in the Turk's head, were sprinkled. Probably because the bishop thought a Turk was next door to a heathen. He dropped more water than usual on these six, until the young ones squealed hastily with the cold. It was noted, on the contrary, that the little folks and the mince pie dishes were gently handled, as if the good man had visions of Christmas coming and the good things on the table. Yet it was evident that such tiny people could not bear what healthy babies of full size would think nothing of, whether it was because of the damp weather, or the cold in the air in the brick church, or too much excitement, or because there were not 366 nurses or milk bottles ready. It came to pass that every one of the wee creatures died when the sun went down. Just where they were buried is not told, but for hundreds of years there was in one of the Hague churches a monument in honor of these little folks, who lived but a day. It was graven with portraits in stone of the count and countess, and told of their children, as many as the days of the year. Nearby were hung up to the two basins, in which the holy water used by the bishop in sprinkling the babies was held. The year, month, and day of the wonderful event were also engraved. Many people from various lands came to visit the tomb. The guidebook spoke of it, and tender woman wept as they thought how 366 little cradles in the Count's castle would have looked had each baby lived. So, as you can see, this story is more about perspective, and it's what happens when you lose it. Because the moment you start calling something like a burden, you start recognizing it as valuable. And I think it's like, I will put it this way. Not everything is taken from you, but sometimes it's expanded beyond what you can handle. And the woman, she didn't lose control because she had too many kids. Like, she lost control because she didn't respect what she had. You know what I mean? And I would say, you might look at it and say, well, why are you putting it on her? I think it was just everybody. And if you look at the story, if you look at it, the story just kept getting kind of like almost like more and more and more and more and more and more. And I don't think anyone, and it just multiplied. It just kept growing and growing. It like nobody could stop with it. Nobody could stop what was happening, and they just kind of had to deal with it. But I think if you look at it this way, I guess if you look at it this way, like, it's kind of like, instead of saying like how much, like looking at it as like, yo, these are like 366 kids. It's more about, here is, it's like, what is the real, like, what are we calling, a burden? You know what I mean? And I think, like, for me, as I was reading the story, it just seems as if the more children she had, I was like, yo, that is a lot of kids. And then you could tell by the manservants and the maids, and how the one maid who tripped over and spilled the kids to the to the bishop, calling out like the hundred and something odd names, and then all of a sudden being like, yo, just give me a bucket and let me. So like, as the people kept trying to deal with it, they kind of, you could tell that they were trying to make everything easier, instead of saying, you know what, let's just take it one step at a time and enjoy this day with all these kids. You know what I mean? So like it's almost like that's why I say it's a change of perspective, because it's like you look at all these kids and you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is overwhelming." Instead of saying, "Wait, if you just do it step by step by step and just enjoy the whole process." It may have been a much more enjoyous, and maybe the result wouldn't have become the same, but you never know. But I'm just saying, but I think that like it's a crazy thing because you look at it and you're saying, and I think it is like, what is a burden? You know what I mean? And it to bring it into like today's, I guess if you want to say like today's perspective, or something that I would say is relevant to today, is that I saw a video, and it was about like basically I think his name is Lawyer Lee or something like that. He's on YouTube. Great guy. Like he's a black lawyer down in Georgia, and he was watching like he was basically like analyzing and reacting to a video of a woman who, or a police officer who came and saw, like got a police call, and there were 6 kids. So 3 kids in one car, 3 kids in another car, on like a day where it was like 86 degrees, you know what I mean, outside. Now, normally 86 degrees out on the West Coast, like where I'm at now, nothing. It's not, it's hot, but it's not that big of a deal. But this is like back on like, I think the East Coast or down in the South, where it's like humid. And apparently like these kids, were in this car, but they were all under the age of like 5. So the oldest one was 5 years old, and all the rest, so 6 kids all under the age of 5. Mom comes back, oh yeah, it's my car. I wasn't gone that long. Here it is to find out that these kids were in this car for like, the one set of kids were in the car for like an hour and a half. And then the second group of kids was in there for like 2 hours, right? And, these parents, these 2 women, like 2 sisters actually, to me, like treat the way they treated those kids, it was like they were like, oh well, we're just gonna run over here real quick and then come back. Like getting those kids out of the car, like think about it, 3 and 3. They had like strollers to where they could put the kids in there and everything, but that was too much of a headache and too much of a hassle. But if you notice, instead of just saying, well, wait, let's just take this process one by one, take the kids out, put them in, which they had to do anyway when the cops got there, and just take them in with me. They were like, oh no 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 no, we're just gonna do it like, well, I'll just leave them in there. And like the one lady left a phone in the car for like one of the kids to call in case they got like too hot or something like that. Something like that. But it was crazy, like watching this. And much like this story, yeah, the parents, they tried dealing with it in a quote unquote responsible way. Oh, we'll give the oldest one a telephone so that if she gets too hot, give us a call and then we'll come back. But 2 hours for 6 kids. And the youngest one was like 8, like straight up a baby, like an infant, I think it was. Like it was maybe about like, the kid looked maybe about like 10 or 11 months old. And that's what I'm saying about perspective. Like the ladies came back and they were like, oh, it's okay. No problem. We were only inside for a little bit. You know what I mean? But yet it was like, no, like these are your kids. You know what I mean? Like you can't just get the fuck up, leave them in the car because it's more convenient for you. You know what I mean? And putting their lives in danger. It's more about like, yo, why don't you take this as it is and just, hey, one at a time, take your kids, deal with them. So in a sense, it is the same, but it is more or less just like but like that's what I'm saying. It's about perspective. And then seeing the 2 moms inside the jail, they were like, yo, we are getting put in for endangerment. And then the kids had to stay because they had to take the kid, like the kids were in there for so long, they got taken to a hospital and the moms couldn't go get them for like 5 days, 5 business days. But it was already like a Friday or something. So it would have been like 9 days the kids were going to be by themselves. So like all of it was just like they were like, oh yeah, it's okay. But then again, looking at from the police officer, bystanders, and all that, and these women were like, why don't you just mind your business? And it's like, but why don't you think about these kids in here at 86? And it's like it's smoking hot. You can't do this. So it was pretty nuts. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like these women, they thought, oh, bringing their kids were going to be a burden instead of it being like, oh, this would be a nice little trip for us or whatever it was, and take care of them and taking more responsibility for their kids. But here we are. Um, but the good thing is that because of but for next time, we're gonna be stepping into a story that looks that's gonna be a little bit lighter, almost playful, but don't let it fool you because when something starts speaking and repeating and it's mirroring it when it hears you, it doesn't just entertain, it exposes. And once it starts, you won't be able to ignore it. So, with that being said, why don't you try to guess what that is? And until next time, take care.